everyone, I'm Charlotte Kilpatrick reporting for Vaccine Nation at the World Vaccine Congress in Washington. I'm delighted that today we're joined by Brian Dean Abramson from the National Vaccine Law Association. Thank you for your time. To kick us off, would you kindly introduce yourself and the role you play within your organization?
Absolutely. My name is Brian Dean Abramson, and I am currently a member of the board of directors of the National Vaccine Law Association. I was the founding chair of the organization when we started a few years ago, and I have just rolled off of that and onto a position on the board, and am continuing to work with the organization as we develop our conferences and other activities.
Fantastic. So we'll come back to what you do a little bit later, but let's discuss the panel that you were on, or you're going to be on, about vaccines and vaccination and how we teach them. Can you tell us about some of the key concerns that we're expecting to hear at this?
Yes, this panel actually originates from an article that was published a few years ago at the beginning of the pandemic, where a person who was a medical professional by trade, but was spouting some sort of anti-vaccine rhetoric, said as part of their commentary that you don't learn about vaccines, or you don't learn the truth about vaccines in medical school. And this was something of a surprise. It was responded to by a medical school professor who said, no, we do teach about vaccines and we teach these aspects of them. But that sparked the question, since there is a small but noisy proportion of people in the medical community who really should know better, who get caught up in anti-vaccine rhetoric and misinformation, how are people in the medical professions, in medicine, nursing, pharmacy, learning about vaccines and vaccination as part of their training? And are we doing enough to ensure that, first of all, they are not susceptible to misinformation themselves, and then that they're able to communicate to the patients that they see about misinformation, and to counter things that people are hearing in public when patients come for counseling about vaccination.
Absolutely, very topical and very relevant to our current situation, I imagine. So could you tell us a bit about the work that you do with the National Vaccine Law Association?
Absolutely. The National Vaccine Law Association also developed out of a need displayed by the pandemic. There are a lot of different areas of vaccine law. There are areas where people work as professionals in helping manufacturers get licensure for products and new technologies, in getting intellectual property protection, and then in a very different kind of sphere, in developing public health policies, determining whether vaccination mandates are needed, or whether there are systems that need to be put in place for the delivery of vaccines, dealing with adverse events, dealing with anti-vaccine activism. And all of these groups of people tend to be very siloed in their field, so they don't communicate with each other. And we felt it was necessary to create a structure to bring people in all these different fields together so that they could collaborate and have these transdisciplinary conversations where they come to understand the role that everyone plays in part of this continuum of an effort of public policy towards getting the population as fully vaccinated against contagious disease as possible. And how, really people from fields like intellectual property, who might not necessarily see themselves as having a role in this public policy goal, have an influence on it. And the way that they carry out their activities can influence the end product, the result of whether people have faith and confidence in vaccines. So we're developing the umbrella structure under which everyone can come together and get the most up-to-date and accurate information, and then also collaborate and talk with each other and learn about what everyone is doing in the field.
Fantastic. Sounds like a very important role that you've assumed there. And you've mentioned the umbrella and the different aspects of vaccine law. How, perhaps either as a whole or as individual parts, how capably is vaccine law keeping pace with vaccine technology and innovation developments, or is there a little lag there that we need to address?
The law as a whole tends to lag behind developments in technology and advances. There's a longstanding kind of tradition in the law that it's very reactive to crisis. When a crisis comes, then a bunch of laws are made and passed that are intended to address that kind of crisis if it happens again. But we never have the same crisis twice. There's always some some great variation to that. And we really saw that during the COVID pandemic when we had the Mpox outbreak, and a lot of public health people were trying to adapt, to use the mechanisms that they had developed to fight COVID, to adapt those to Mpox, but it's a very different disease. So very different strategies needed to be adopted. So we find ourselves very often with legal structures that were designed for a previous time or a previous event, and trying to figure out how to use those structures to deal with the next crisis and the novelties that it presents to us. And one of the things that we're doing as an association is trying to keep on the cutting edge as much as possible with what is happening with the law. And of course, the law is not uniform. In the United States, we have 50 states, and each state has their own laws. For example, Tennessee just passed a law to ban the introduction of vaccines to food, because there's some sort of misinformation or rumor on the internet that people are trying to sneak vaccines in through your food. And the fact that we have state legislatures that are responsive to that kind of misinformation, that kind of nonsensical ideation, is a challenge of law that we're facing. And then the other side of it is we see litigation and all sorts of very novel litigation theories that people bring, both in the context of pursuing the development of technologies and advancement of technologies, and in some cases in opposition to those because they've been led to believe that they're bad things, and are trying to use the law in ways that it's not necessarily supposed to be used to combat that and to get to the ends that they want.
Wow, this is fascinating perspectives from you. I imagine that you're bringing a really fresh voice to the community here at the Congress. So I just wanted to ask you what you're looking forward to, or what you're hoping to achieve by being here.
Well, I've been coming to the World Vaccine Congress. This is my fourth time coming, and I have had a better and better experience every time. And really, the opportunity that I have to meet people who are dealing with all sorts of issues that, I consider myself a vaccine law expert, but I deal with people who are on the front lines of actually dealing with issues, and they have situations that they come across that are like, well, I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about what the legal ramifications of that would be, and now I'm learning new things that I can apply in my own work every day. And I also teach vaccine law, so these are things that I can teach to my students who are going to be the next generation of people working in vaccine law, about what the challenges of the field are and directions in which it has developed, just in the very short time that we've had an emphasis on vaccine law in this country.
Amazing. Well, I hope the rest of the Congress is really productive for you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.